everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. So happy to have you with us on this Monday or whenever you're listening to the show, especially after a 4-point week for Nashville SC. Of course, I'm here with Clay Trainum, Valer Shabilla. As always, it's always just good to talk to the both of you. I mean, mainly it's nice to talk to Valer this week because we're not going to see Valer for 2 weeks. It's crazy.
Yes, it is crazy. I don't think I've ever missed.
Are you going to watch Arsenal in the Champions League final?
First of all, that's actually really mean. So I think I'm going to kick you out of this recording session, and I'm going to do the rest of the episode with Clay. So there's that. Second of all, I am going to España, as the locals say, and we'll be enjoying some time there. So look out for some pictures next week. Maybe some wild videos here and there. Very little NSC analysis. I'm not going to say no NSC analysis, but very little NSC analysis. I will be on the plane for the Toronto game, so I'm at the mercy of the plane Wi-Fi there. Otherwise, I am not going to probably watch the Wednesday Columbus game because, I'll be in Sevilla, and I feel like I'll have better things to do. No offense to NSC Columbus or anyone involved in that match.
How's the weekend?
Nothing interesting from my end. I'll pass it over to Clay.
I mean, I had a very fun weekend, honestly. I mean, the big thing is let's just say it. It was the last ever match at Goodison Park on Sunday at 6 a.m., which was pretty crazy. I know that everyone knows that I'm an Everton fan, and I know that they're rolling their eyes just me talking about it. But it is, genuinely speaking, one of the most historic venues for the sport in the world. It's been there for 133 years. It was the first purpose-built football stadium in England. It is the reason Liverpool FC exists, because Everton moved there in 1892, which left Anfield open for another team. So it's like a hugely significant stadium in the history of the sport. And I've been fortunate enough to be there 4 times and to watch the scenes happen outside was just amazing. And I do think that people should go back and check it out because Pele played there, Eusebio played there. It hosted more World Cup matches than basically everywhere except Wembley during the 1966 World Cup. It's the level of history is crazy, and it is, it's not going to have any more men's soccer matches. And so I just think
Marwan Fellaini
kind of wild, but it's
there.
just one of the, it's a hugely significant thing. So I'm a history person.
Adonis Creed fought there. I mean, come on, folks.
Yeah, I mean, there are photos of Muhammad Ali training at Goodison. Like that, it's crazy. It's crazy the level of history of that stadium. So, if you don't know much about it, it's a fun thing to dive into, and it'll now be the home of the largest women's soccer stadium in England as the Everton women are moving into it, which is hopefully a good sign for English women's soccer. Arsenal, of course, lead the way right now in terms of supporting their women's team in England. And Chelsea and Man City have had great teams as well. So hopefully this is a sign that Everton will be, who has a strong history on the women's side, Everton will be actually investing in women's soccer, and we'll see a big move in women's soccer in England, which it's only been professional in England since 2018, which is maddening. So hopefully it's a sign of things to come there.
And before Stephen, you go into your weekend, I did remember that my girlfriend and I went to Radnor and walked around. Shout out nature. That's all.
I helped teach Mary how to eat crawfish yesterday, so we got that going for us.
Yo, I like having people listen to this show. Like, we need better weekends, guys. Like, what is going on? Is it just the fact that we're mid-season now and there's...
I saw ducks. I saw turtles. I saw an eagle fly. I mean, what else do you want from my weekend?
There's a lot of turtles at Radnor. I really like all the turtles at Radnor.
But in all seriousness, since I'm going to Spain,
by the way,
I think I'm going to have more exciting.
Don't let this schmuck from DC talk down to you.
Yes. Thank you, Clay. How's Chattanooga these days, Steven?
From DC, I'm in live in DC. Well, I live in Arlington, Virginia,
He's
but
in the swamp. He's a swamp creature.
My weekend was good as well. Thank you very much for asking. A new Doom game came out, so I've been playing a lot of Doom: The Dark Ages. It's very good. If you're looking for a game where you just mindlessly kill demons for, I don't know, 15 hours, 20 hours straight, it's a good one. It's good therapy. So do
That's the
that.
guy who told you to have better weekends. He played video games.
I went out. I
Anyway,
touched
moving on.
grass, Steven. Have you seen a green thing in your life this weekend?
Speaking, I had basil on pizza.
He's in the swamp. Of
Speaking
course he has.
Speaking of killing their demons, Nashville SC having a great May so far. 8 points so far in May. I I'm exhausted already with the amount of matches that we have, and we haven't even this week is another dual week. Um, I I don't necessarily normally this is the time where we kind of just have like an overall perspective of the team specifically. And I think I just want to focus on May for a little bit. Did you expect, even with the performance that we're going to talk about on Saturday, that wasn't terrific? Did you expect Nashville to have 8 points in May?
I mean, I think the optimistic part definitely did, because 3 out of the 4 league games are at home. The one Open Cup game was at home as well. So maybe if you take the Chattanooga and Atlanta game, which was away, and then you look at the 3 home game stretch that Nashville just finished up against DC, you look at Charlotte, Red Bulls, and DC, you probably chalk DC up for a win, and then maybe a draw against one of those other teams. But the way it played out was maybe a little bit different. All things considered, I do think this is still, looking at the season, Nashville is exceeding expectations. And looking at May specifically, I do still think Nashville being undefeated so far in, what is it now, 6 games in May. Um, that's I mean, that's pretty good, and that's honestly not. No, I didn't expect them to go 6 undefeated after the 3-0 in Seattle, because actually, I guess it would have been after the 7-2, which was to end April, against the Chicago Fire. Even with that, I didn't expect them to go 6 undefeated. But hey, that's really good.
Was it
I
Clay
mean,
specifically? Was it Clay that said, like, I think his prediction was we would get a win against Red Bull, and then Nashville's going to Nashville against DC. I don't know if he got the
I was going to say
actual.
you may not have expected that, but I very much expected that to play out.
It's a new era.
What I will say is I expected the performances to be about what they were. I think the results are exceeding maybe the level of performance that the NSC had in May. I think that that is the one thing that I think does stick out is, and I don't mean this in a negative way, because it's very much not a negative way. Getting good results out of performances that you don't think were as good as they could have been is a sign of a good team. But I do think like there are a few games where Nashville, made up for maybe not taking advantage of their chances in the first half, maybe giving up a soft goal here or there and finding a win out of a game where they maybe wouldn't have in other years. So I do think like from a points at the table, looking at it, like they're exceeding expectations. I think we're kind of seeing uh, a team that is still very much figuring it out. But if you're very much figuring it out and still getting points on the board, that's a really good sign. I think the biggest surprise out of this is doing it all without Walker Zimmerman, who has now been out for quite a bit. And I think that is something that is very, very, very. That's probably the biggest noteworthy thing about this month is being relatively stout defensively, at least in line with what you were doing with Walker Zimmerman, and still getting points. And honestly, getting points from defenders like, and I don't mean just like Andy Nahar coming in and getting a goal. I mean like Jason Palacios coming in and being a threat to score off corners and set pieces, which is, I mean, he's literally replacing Walker Zimmerman on both sides of the ball at that point. So I think that is possibly the most notable thing about this month.
Sitting in fourth place currently in MLS with 24 points, tied with Orlando, but I mean ahead of the likes of Miami. Well, Miami is not. I don't know specifically what's going on there, but I mean, it's higher than I kind of expected as well, and it's been a lot of fun to I mean, until Saturday, it has been a lot of fun just to watch this team and the way they progress. Even even with even on Saturday, Chris Applewhite getting his first start, that's something we never would have saw even last year. As a 17-year-old getting eight, did he just turn 18?
He
17
hasn't turned
still?
18 yet.
Just, I mean, getting a start in his first MLS match. That's something and still being in fourth place. So I am excited. I am optimistic. I'm continuing to be that. I'm very curious, just with this amount of games currently, and seeing our kind of rotated, squad play on Saturday. I am a little scared when it comes to rotating in the future. But obviously, we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
Well, now that Steven took all the talking points from the second segment, I think it's important to mention that the next stretch is very away heavy, which is the opposite of what this stretch was. And I think it's expected that Nashville will drop a few results just because it's an away heavy stretch, especially going to Columbus midweek right after you go to Toronto. Those aren't easy games. Those aren't easy trips. Toronto is an easy game, but not an easy trip, perhaps. But Columbus is not neither of those. So it's just one of those things where if Nashville is able to keep up these sort of results, as in be undefeated while going on the road, then you're truly looking at somebody actually fighting for that top four in the East. My guess is that they're gonna maybe get a couple of L's here and there, which is to be expected again, especially when visiting these like a Columbus team. But I don't think that means necessarily that Nashville drops to outside of playoffs or even in the play-in position. I think that 5-6 spot can still be maintained even with dropping a couple games on the road.
It is worth noting that it is very difficult to get wins on the road in MLS. Like, historically speaking, as difficult as it is pretty much anywhere to get road wins in MLS. And we shouldn't lose sight of that. So, Steven used to have his whole panic room segment on this show back in the day. So, just something to keep in mind. I also think it's worth noting that it is MLS and weird things happen in MLS that are sometimes indicators of some deeper lying issue, and sometimes they're indicators of a pretty wild league that is large, that has lots of travel, and that has short rosters. And so I think when we came here after the Seattle win, very justifiably, people were like, is this a sign of where Nashville stands, within the league? Or is this a got the tactics wrong? It's a one off. And I don't know that we fully have the answer to that yet, but it certainly feels more like the latter than the former. And an example of that to think about would be Chicago. Chicago has gotten some very good results against some teams this year and lost 7-2 against Nashville. So weird things can happen on the road. And so that's just something to keep in mind as we go into a road heavy stretch here. Nashville SC is probably going to throw up a couple of stinkers out there in the mix of that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to change everything or they have to go away or it's some deeper lying thing that's happening. It's just the nature of the league sometimes.
And obviously, we talked a lot about it last week when it comes to the La Brigada situation. Clay, is there any updates that you want to provide specifically from that side?
There's nothing tangible. I know that they considered coming back on Saturday. Now the operation that was taking place within Nashville is thought to have been concluded. That's been reported that the operation is postponed, at least for now. I can tell you, living in my neighborhood, which is in Antioch, which was in the heart of a lot of these things that were going on a couple weeks ago and last week, that activity is significantly down. And this past Saturday and Sunday, it was almost like normal in my neighborhood, where the previous couple of weekends, people were scared, and we didn't see lots of folks outside. We didn't see lots of folks walking to school. So on the basis of that, I would be surprised if we didn't see the La Brigada presence back later this month for the May 31st game. Now, I don't have any insider info on that front. That's just kind of the vibe I've gotten, is that they're going to take it game by game. So I would imagine that we will see them sooner rather than later, unless things were to change and get back to where things were a couple weeks ago. The most important thing to the folks in La Brigada is making sure that their people are safe and they have support. And I think that Nashville as a whole has been very supportive. I mean, the soccer community as a whole has been very supportive of La Brigada, and the soccer community definitely misses their presence at matches. And so I look forward to their return, whatever that may be, whether it's May 31st or whether it's later this season.
And we have 2 matches to talk about. We're going to do that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at PharmaSoccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Of course, please make sure you check out 615soccer.com. Spell that out if you are looking for any sort of Nashville SC, Huntsville, local soccer information. Please make sure you check out 615soccer.com. A lot of cool stuff going on. Even if you want to sign up for the free tier, would love to have you be a part of it. Or if you want to pay a few extra dollars and see the video recording of actually, I think you can do that for free too. Can you do that for free? No?
You have to be a Kappa member.
To see my face, you have to be a Kappa member?
Since Steven is lying to you, I will give you some truths. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Uncle Beezy on the socials, not only for wearing his Pharma shirt, but also for him sitting very close to the people I knew at the game. So when I went to visit them, he was right there and we shook hands. So shout out to him. Shout out to a couple other people who stopped me at the stadium and said hi, specifically to the guy who said, "Come on, you Gunners," to me. That felt good. Thank you. We needed that. It's been a tough month or so. And then also, I want to thank the people who reached out throughout last week regarding the La Brigada situation, whether it was a DMs or in person. We've had a few people reach out to me and say, Clay, you did a good job explaining what was going on and helping, put a little bit of perspective, even if maybe wherever they stand on the issue, I guess. I think giving that perspective, I received a lot of positive feedback on that. So I just want to thank everybody who reached out regarding that. I'm sure Clay got a lot of messages as well. So yeah.
I hope yours are more positive than mine.
Oh, yikes. My bad. I didn't mean to put you on blast like that. Yeah, mine were both, I would say, like 98% positive.
I am glad to hear it. The people that I don't care for on social media, I had a very tough week on that front. So, but shout out to John. I met him at the game. We always enjoy people coming up and telling us they listen, especially if they're positive. So shout out to everyone who comes and talks to us. If we remember your name, we always try and make sure that we come and give you a shout out on here. Shout out to anybody who buys Pharma gear. I usually am wearing a Pharma shirt at most of these games. So we do enjoy seeing other people that we don't know personally wearing pharmaceutical soccer stuff. It kind of is a reminder that, hey, it's not just us just talking every week, which is kind of nice.
And Steven, where can you get that Pharma shirts and stuff like that?
PharmaSoccer.com. We have a website where there's merchandise there, so you should go check that out. It's really cool. Maybe one day we'll get ours, but probably not.
That's your own fault at this point.
Who knows? Look, where do we want to start off? As we had a 2-week match. Do we want to start off with the boring one that we don't want to talk about, or do we want to talk about the win first?
Steven, I worked really hard on this rundown. Can you just follow it?
Can I set up
Steven,
You are so no.
Why whenever I do a rundown, you follow it, and Valère, who you've known longer than me, does a rundown and you don't follow
it? All right, look. Hi, everybody. This is Stephen Robinson, your teacher instructor in show business. As we are in show business, podcast show business, sometimes you're trying to set up or give a softball throw to your co-host and constituents. I knew where we were going. I was just giving you a specific way to segue the conversation. So I'll say again, which one do we want to start out with, Valère?
Anyway, it's constituents.
I hate what I hate this show.
Okay, guys. So DC United, Nashville SC, right? The rotation that Nashville SC did against DC showcases a couple things. I think the first thing is that there is depth in terms of numbers. For a while, Nashville didn't have depth in numbers, and I think that was kind of the Achilles heel to Nashville playoff runs often, because when you looked at guy 1 through 11, pretty good, pretty solid, and then maybe 12, 13 were all right, and then after that it was kind of a let off in terms of quality. I think in terms of quality right now, Nashville has 1 through 14 pretty solid, maybe even 15 really solid quality and playoff caliber in terms of quality. The form might not be there, and I think that's what we're starting to realize a little bit in terms of whether it's Brian Acosta coming back from injury, Brugman, still finding his space here in this team, or players. I mean, even Jacob Schaffelberg started the season injured, and he's kind of played himself back into form, to where Ahmed Qasim has had the inverse, right? So I think these things will need to be, ironed out, I guess. And I mean, it's not really a choice. Nashville is needing to do these rotations and will continue to need to do those rotations this month because of the congestion of game. Now, some players, like I said, Jacob Schaffelberg, for example, they can play themselves into form. Some players is something that happens at practice. Some players, maybe it's a goal that they're waiting for, and it goes in, and then they feel better, they feel more confident. And some stuff is just outside the pitch. So it's not really just dependent on, hey, play this guy, start him every match, he'll get better. It's not always as linear as that. So I think in terms of rotation, I like where BJ Callahan is doing. He's getting other players involved, even if that means maybe drawing against DC in order to hopefully do something against Orlando, right? And I think that's kind of that sort of mindset I think is needed in order to get the whole squad with enough minutes to where you can switch one in and out without losing as much quality as we've seen previously.
The thing for me that sticks out about DC, and it's not good, right? It's not a good performance. And I think, like, you just acknowledge that on the front end, and you understand that there are reasons behind it, whether that be form, rotation, whatever it might be. The thing to keep in mind is that it's a game of very small moments. And for as lacking as Nashville was in form, if a guy is a foot behind on an offside call at a couple points in that first half, it ends up looking like a game that finishes 3 or 4-0. Because I think that that's the way it would have happened. DC was playing in a certain way that was ceding possession to Nashville and assuming that Nashville wasn't going to find its way. And they didn't, and it worked out. And we've seen Nashville line up that way too at times. And I think that it was a little bit of misfortune in the first half that carried over. And if you keep that in mind, what you saw as a Nashville team that can work with backups in and can play the same way and can try and generate things from possession, that it just didn't come off the right way. Because I do think that we get lost in sort of the end result of it. And so, like I said, it's not a good performance, but there were things in it that were good. And if Nashville finds a way to squeak a goal out of that first half, I think that the DC has to open up, and it ends up being a pretty ugly game. Now, maybe not Chicago ugly, but like a pretty ugly game. And that's the part that I'm going to choose to focus on. Coming from that game, you do want, whenever a player is given an opportunity to change the game, whether that be Teal Bunbury, who is not having a good start to the season, but is also having the type of start where you wonder if he scores a goal, does it kind of make things less tense and less tight? Ahmed Kassem, who's just trying to recapture what he had his first few appearances with NSC, things like that. You want to see one of those guys step up, and that didn't happen against DC. And maybe it'll happen next game, but also these are problems that we've seen from the first line starters. Charlotte was not, a first half full of people taking advantage of their chances either. And Nashville ended up having to come from behind to win that game.
Well, and I think Teal Bunbury is a good place to kind of talk, especially when it comes to both matches, because he did play in both. One of them, he came on as a sub in the 81st and was excellent when it came to hold up play and holding on to the lead specifically. Comes into the second match with the opportunity to come in and show that he is going to be able to score in a position where he needs to, and has a couple opportunities and isn't there specifically. Is it time for Teal? I understand. I mean, they even brought it up on the broadcast, right? That when there was a player that BJ was asked that doesn't get enough credit and appreciation, Teal Bunbury was brought up in the way that he captains the squad, the way that he is in practice, all this type of stuff. But when it comes to him starting a match and expecting him to help us get a result, which he still was expected in that match, even though it was a 0-0 draw, he was expected to score. He gets put in that position to do so. Is it something that Nashville does need to figure out from an offensive side when it comes to Teal?
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of things. And I don't, the thing that's interesting about Teal Bunbury is that generally when players are at that age or maybe at that point of their career, the effort or the desire is not there, right? And I just don't think that's the case with Teal Bunbury. I mean, you can see he's putting in 110% every time he steps on that pitch. And that's been true throughout his time in Nashville. And I would say throughout his time in the league, but let's just keep it to Nashville. And that was true against DC. I think he was putting in a lot of effort. He was working really hard. But if you ask Teal right now, he'll tell you that he's disappointed to come out of that in the first half with the performance that he had. Because I think he's a guy who expects more for himself. And I think BJ Callahan expects more from him. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't do that. I always remember last season when he gave that back heel assist to Hani Mukhtar in Atlanta to help Nashville win that game. And, if you had guessed, 10 Nashville players to have that assist, you wouldn't have guessed Teal Bunbury within those 10. So when he's still capable. I think the skill, the quality is still there for him. But what I would like to see from a Nashville perspective is that Teal Bunbury is most likely, I don't know, I don't have any information, but I would assume he was going to retire, if not the end of this season. Maybe he gets one more last contract here or there for a year, like a Dax McCarty type of thing. What I would like to see is just like Applewhite coming in, is that succession plan from Nashville SC that I just haven't seen, and maybe they'll get to it this summer. But when you look at Surridge, Teal Bunbury, the third guy in that line is effectively within the roster, Adam Sipic, who unfortunately just hasn't broken into even the Huntsville team really on a consistent basis. He does get a good amount of minutes there, but he's not breaking into that team. And then obviously, if you can't even break into Huntsville, you're not playing for NSC. Woodman Pacius is out there on loan. That might be another option there, but he's kind of playing wide. So if you were to have a similar replacement to Surridge, I think it's time for Nashville SC to look into that succession plan. Actually, they might be a little late into looking at that succession plan because I just don't see Teal Bunbury as an option that's going to help you get a goal when needed if Surridge is unable to complete a game.
I hear that point. I do think that Woodman Pacius is probably who they want, and there are reasons to not have him essentially in Nashville this year that aren't fully in his control. I do wonder, we talked about how important depth is, And depth isn't just important in rotating the squad, as we talk about ad nauseum on here. Depth is important in making starters work for their minutes and having people push each other forward. Like Jacob Shackelberg's been pretty good for a few weeks. What did it take for Jacob Shackelberg to, one, coming back from injury, but two, having his spot taken from him, made him, kind of move forward. We saw it happen with Joe Willis as well a couple years ago. And so I don't think, because Teal and Surridge don't play the same way, they're kind of locked into roles that aren't necessarily fully in competition with each other. I will say it is noticeable how much more physical that Surridge is uh, compared to maybe at times in the past, especially in the last couple weeks. I mean, they're all over him like he's this massive threat in the air, which he hadn't proven to be, in Nashville. Whereas Teal is certainly getting the physicality is that's definitely part of the game for Teal in the way that people defend him. So I just would like to see something similar that Nashville can turn to, whether that be, Women's Passies or something else, but like someone that you can make a like for like sub and they can play in a similar way. Because if we're saying, you can rotate the squad and play in the same way, but you have a very clear difference in the way that your two, main strikers are essentially, and number one and number two on the depth chart, it makes it a little bit harder to do that. I know that BJ isn't fully positionally like this person does this person does that, this person does this, but it does change the way that Nashville lines up and the way that Nashville plays, which is a good thing on one hand because you can kind of change something up within a game. But if you're just trying to get fresh legs and keep playing the same way, it does throw some wrenches into the system.
Yeah, I think for me, especially when it comes to DC, I think one thing to think about for me that does give me a little bit of pause is that it didn't look much better when the actual players did come on. It just didn't. There's a reason why the match ended up 0-0. Um, I I think it might be somewhat of the, it's been so fun to watch this system, right? It's been so much fun to watch some of the passes that are being made. Even in the first half, I'm sitting there being like, "Whoa! If some of these passes actually connected into goals, it would be one of the sexiest things that we see." But we saw it when we played Atlanta, when Atlanta went up 1-0. It was a little scary how we could not break down that defense. I think DC kind of played in that same scenario where they were kind of sitting back. And I think it's going to be one of the things with the system specifically that BJ is going to go through growing pains to figure out when it comes to, hey, how do you break down a defense that is just sitting back? I think it'll be very interesting to see how that works.
I do think it's not a big point. It's just a point worth noting. I do think that in that situation, it was basically impossible for Nashville to get into rhythm. And one of the reasons it was impossible for Nashville to get into a rhythm is because it was really poor officiating in the second half. Like I
God, it
said, I don't
was
think that's
so
the
bad.
reason I don't think that's the reason that Nashville didn't get a win from that game. So please don't interpret it that way. But you have a team that was intent on not playing. And if you have that, which, credit to DC, that's taking advantage of a situation. But if you have that, like, it can be hard to get in rhythm. And I think lack of finishing can be contagious in a game. I don't know if there's any numbers to prove that, but there's certainly an intangible aspect of confidence. Like against Chicago, it's a 7-2 win, but every time Nashville had a breakaway, you were sitting there like, oh, they're absolutely going to score here. And then in DC, or against DC rather, you have several opportunities, and at the end of that game, even though Nashville was putting together some okay opportunities here and there, I was like, Nashville's not scoring unless they get a set piece or a penalty. Like, you can just kind of see certain things playing out in the game, and part of that is not having any fluidity. Part of that's a lack of rhythm, and I think that all of the time wasting, which it's part of the game, and they did it, all of the like physicality that was kind of left unchecked at times and then totally called every touch at other times, can really affect a team that is trying to play when there's a team that's not trying to play. And I say that as a fan of a team in England that oftentimes is trying not to play. So that I understand the gamesmanship to it.
Yeah, Valer, your microphone is not working.
No, it is
But
working. What I was saying is, These are the effects of somebody watching Sean Dyche teams for a little too long.
And Sam Allardyce.
And Sam Allardyce.
But Nashville did get a win on Wednesday against Red Bulls New York. Our first win against Red Bull finally happening. That wasn't a 0-0 draw or a 2-0 loss. Nashville did get a 2-1 win with goals coming from different spots when it comes to Patrick Yazbak's first goal, when Hani Mukhtar getting the goal as well. But I mean, shout out to Yazbak for his goal. We talked about it on this show multiple times that it was going to come eventually for Yazbak, and it finally did in a ripped shot. That was such a great shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think before we talk about the goals, maybe just let's talk about the difference in formation between these two games and what the shape looked like for Nashville SC. When Brugman comes on, and this happened both for the Red Wolves match and the DC match, for some reason, BJ Callahan prefers to play him as a 10, which means that it's a more of a 4-2-3-1 rather than a 4-2-2-2. And I have yet to see Nashville play in that 4-2-3-1 shape and be like expansive. BJ said the reason for that is to have an extra man in terms of pressing, and it has certainly worked in terms of counter pressing and also just pressing when the other team is playing out from the back. But I just don't think it has worked out in possession. So when I see Nashville set up in the 4-2-2, and I see a pressing goal coming in from Yazbak, and then I see a build-up goal coming in right after that from Mukhtar in the Red Bull game, I'm wondering if it's even worth it to go to that sort of shape at all. Or is it just simply that BJ Callahan doesn't want or doesn't trust Brugman to play in one of those two sixes, if you would, and wants him to be higher up the pitch, so it's a little bit less of a responsibility? I don't know the answer to this, and I think time will tell a little bit. But I just don't understand fully the switch in formation or shape. And I think the Red Bull game is the biggest testament of how solid Nashville SC can be, scoring in multiple ways and hurting other teams with that 4-2-2-2 shape.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously a little bit more just about the details within the formation and just kind of the breakdown within. I'm just going to assume like some of it is the week stretch, like the stretch of the weeks. I mean, do you think also that we were overlooking the DC United game a little bit when it comes to the rotation, as we have, a big Open Cup match against Orlando next week? Beating Red Bulls on Wednesday, really looking to focus at that game, a rotation of 6 players for that DC United match. Like, do we think we overlooked just that DC match a little bit as we were kind of going through?
Yes, and as they should have, Nashville SC. I think they should have done that, and they did it. And as soon as I saw that starting lineup against Orlando, I was sitting next to Ben Wright and Claudio as well, who does great Spanish coverage, and we all just agreed that essentially this is this is Nashville deciding to rotate against DC and going full strength against Orlando. And that's really the right move. And we're going to talk about the Open Cup in the third segment onto why that makes sense. And look, at the end of the day, these players, we're talking about rotation, but like these players are really good still. And I think it's like Brugman just won MVP of MLS Cup. Brian Acosta is coming off, playing really good in his home country. Like these aren't like necessarily like the rotations that we're used to from Nashville SC, I guess, in the past. So I don't want to keep just beating a dead horse, but essentially that's kind of it's what Nashville SC did strategically, and I think in the grand scheme of things, it kind of worked out.
Well, and to take it back to just the Red Bulls match specifically, we talk a lot on here about intangible things sometimes, like a striker needing a goal when they're in a bad spot, or, getting a penalty and maybe getting back on track, scoring a penalty, or finding yourself in successful situations and how that can help you down the line. And ultimately, every time that Nashville has played the Red Bulls the last year and a half or so, the first thing anyone says is that Nashville hasn't beaten the Red Bulls. And there's not really any rhyme or reason to it, because it's not like the Red Bulls did, make a cup run last year, but it's not like there's some unbelievable team. It's a team that has matched up well historically with Nashville, but it's also a team that Nashville was struggling to beat in the second division when Nashville played Red Bulls too. And so you could tell that there's just some level of understanding that that's what's going on. And so getting a Red Bull team and coming in and playing well and getting a win is very important when you're talking about trying to get over the hump. And it's a situation that these current Nashville players are now going to have to deal with on a similar level with Orlando, because Nashville hasn't beaten Orlando in a few years either. Now, when they used to beat Orlando pretty regularly back in the day, they did it in big moments, as we all remember the playoff game at Nissan Stadium. But I think it's been 3 years since Nashville's beaten Orlando, and a lot of those games have been pretty ugly. And so you want to start checking these items off, because that is what, like, you have to beat these teams, regularly if you want to be one of the best teams in the league and one of the best teams in the East. And so this is just another check mark. You played against Red Bulls. You played the way you want to play. You got a win out of it. Now you move on. You do the same against Orlando if you can, in the midweek this week. And now you're starting to see yourself succeeding in areas where you weren't succeeding a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
And how is Nashville going to get that check mark when it comes to beating Orlando? We're going to talk about that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. We are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer at PharmaSoccer. Again, under Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, 615soccer.com. Spell it out. Get great soccer coverage there, as well as pharmasoccer.com for all of the best merchandise that you could possibly ask for. It's getting hot out, so make sure you get your PharmaSoccer t-shirt so you have another shirt to wear. It's pretty dope, so go and get that. I'm excited. It's back, Clay. It is time again for, I don't know if it's necessarily my favorite segment, but I think it's like one of the segments where I just get the most information out of it, just because it's stuff I don't pay attention to. It is springtime. It is May. It is time for Clay's local soccer roundup.
Do we need to get music for it? We need to get a better name.
Yeah, we do. We do need to think of a better name.
Yeah, so it is spring, and it's crazy, right? Like when Nashville SC started, when it was Nashville FC, it was the local amateur team. Like if you just think about it, like there were two teams that merged, and that was Nashville FC, and they merged because the other amateur team went away. And now we're at a point where there are so many local amateur teams that it's almost hard to keep track of. So with that in mind, let me explain this a little bit. So we're going to mostly keep up with the W League and USL, which is amateur women's soccer, the WPSL, which is the largest women's soccer league in the world, and the USL League 2, which is amateur, which is the same level that the Metros were and that Nashville SC U23 was, and NPSL, which is what Nashville FC was. Now there are several teams around, and so these are the teams that I know right now. As Steven knows, as Valer knows to some level, these teams live a weird life, and so they kind of pop up and go away as time goes on. I just want to shout out there are several UPSL teams. Tennessee, this is men's league. Tennessee Tempo, Tennessee United, SC Leopards, that's Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is also Bowling Green FC, and Nashville FC, which is back after years in NPSL. But they're in a huge league that's very hard to keep track of, and so if something happens there that's notable, I'll let you know. But for now, we're going to focus on the more reputable like national leagues. So first off, on the men's side, you have Tennessee SC. That's Tennessee Soccer Club's men's team. They play in USL League 2. They had their opener on May 17th, just a couple days ago, where they drew 1-1 with Columbus United down in Columbus, Georgia. They'll be playing again a little bit later this week on Wednesday at Southern Soccer Academy. They play their games, I believe, in Franklin still. So you'll be able to watch them basically through July. These are college players that are kind of in the summer it's similar to a wooden bat league if you watch college baseball. Now on the women's side, there are several teams playing. Nashville FC Nashville Wolves has gone back away after popping up again last year. They do not appear to have a team this year. So the teams to watch for this year: Nashville Rhythm, which we have followed the Rhythm from the very beginning on the show. Tennessee SC as well has a women's side that I'll get into in a moment, and then Tennessee Tempo, which is actually down here in Murfreesboro. This is their first year, and they are playing in the WPSL in the same league as the Nashville Rhythm, in the same division as the Nashville Rhythm. So Tennessee Tempo has already played their first game this year. They won 4-0 at Jackson, the Jackson Ignite, over the weekend. And they will play Nashville Rhythm down here in Murfreesboro on May 27th. That will be the season opener for the Nashville Rhythm. Now, Tennessee SC, they are in USL's W League, which is, like I said, the amateur league for the women's side. They opened their season this past weekend with a 4-1 win at the Greenville Liberty SC, which would be in South Carolina. You will hear all of these names so many times over the next couple months. I hope that you go out and check out these leagues. Obviously, we do not have a professional women's team in Nashville. So the highest level of women's soccer that you can support are these teams. And the Nashville Rhythm and Tennessee SC have both been very successful teams here locally the last few years. So please go check them out. Tennessee Rhythm play at Mount Juliet for their home games. And you'll probably see me at some of these games. They play very short seasons, so only playing for a couple months, and some of them will be eventually playing possibly on U.S. national teams, possibly on pro teams, possibly around the world. So check out your local amateur soccer team.
Also, shout out to Dream FC out there. Friend of mine did start that team, so go follow them on Instagram, Dream FC Football. They are a semi-professional team playing in NISA Nation, as well as they have a second team, I believe, playing in. I can't keep up with the leagues in an amateur league. Go ahead.
NISA Nation and UPSL are kind of
UPSL,
similar, or USPL, sorry. But yeah. There's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of, so that's the reason why I'm just focusing on the big national ones.
Yes, but they are a men's team. They don't have a women's team, but they've been doing great work and given another opportunity for Nashville semi-pro players. So just want to give them a shout out.
Thank you very much, Clay, for that. Always love the local soccer roundup, stuff that I don't fully pay attention to, especially not being there. It's good to hear about. One thing I'm very excited for that I know Clay is a big proponent of is that this week Open Cup is back and Nashville is a part of it. We have 2 matches this week, of course, both away. So we go to Orlando for the Open Cup, where we've played before and lost, unfortunately, in an Open Cup match, as well as Toronto away. I think the one thing to look at, especially for this Orlando match, is that they had literally 0 rotation in terms of the 2 matches that they had last week. Nashville obviously had a ton. You're assuming BJ is going into this Open Cup tournament, guns a-blazing, full starting lineup. We're in it to win it.
Yes, I believe so. He's been pretty consistent in terms of the wording he's used for the Open Cup. Nashville is seriously wanting to contend for the Open Cup, and they are seriously wanting to play in a Continental Champions League tournament, which is called the Champions Cup for some reason because they changed the marketing. But he is very adamant about that. Every time we've asked him, he's come up and said that. He's also the players are very adamant in terms of that point. So I don't think Nashville will be pulling any punches or rotating for this match. If anything, they'll probably put more importance on this match. They already put more importance on this match than the DC match, and I would wager that they'll put more emphasis on this match than the Toronto match at the weekend. That said, Orlando, like Clay was saying, has gotten the best out of Nashville. The last 2 meetings between these 2 teams both ended 3-0 wins to Orlando at home and away. And there was the playoff series which Orlando won both games 1-0. And then there was a game before that, which Orlando won 1-0 as well. So you have to go back to April 1st, 2023 for the last time Nashville SC won against Orlando. or gotten any sort of result against Orlando. So this is not an easy match. Not to mention that Orlando is 12 games unbeaten right now, including a triumph win against their Florida rivals Inter Miami 3-0 just on Sunday. So but Steven's right. They have Orlando has less of a rest in terms of coming in Sunday to Wednesday rather than a Saturday to Wednesday. They do have the luxury of playing at home, which is a big one. And like I said, they've been a very solid team so far. Even though a lot of those 12 games are draws or 0-0 draws specifically, look, this is an Oscar Pereira team that plays in a very certain way. So even if it's heavily rotated, even if it's not the same guys that scored against Miami, you're going to have a very organized, very well drilled team that's looking to not let Nashville score. So I think it's going to be a very interesting matchup because we were just talking about how this might be a problem for Nashville going forward.
And then, sorry, go ahead, Clay.
Well, I was just going to say, and Orlando is a team that has taken this tournament seriously before. They won the Open Cup was their first trophy as an MLS team, which they won just a few years ago. The first Open Cup after the pandemic was a win by Orlando. And I think you can make a reasonable argument that these are the two best teams that are left in the 16 teams that are left in the Open Cup. And so whoever wins this game is going to favor their chances quite significantly for the rest of the tournament. So you're 4 wins away from your first trophy as a club. They're going to take it. Nashville SC is going to take it very seriously, and I imagine Orlando will, but they can't exactly rotate the squad when they're playing against Miami at the weekend.
And we do play Toronto on Saturday as well away. Not necessarily a good squad, but they did get a 6-1 win against their Canadian counterparts over the weekend. It'll be very interesting to see what Toronto we get. Are they on the up and up after last week, or are they actually bad? And just before, really quick, you guys go into it just because I have to go. I'm going to give my predictions of a we're going to win in the Open Cup in penalties and a 2-1 win against Toronto in Toronto. So go us. Yay, Nashville.
And as Steven has to drop for personal reasons, I think he's maybe traveling to Chattanooga for the game this weekend.
You did notice that he intentionally avoided bringing up Chattanooga on this episode because of who they played at the weekend, right?
Yes, because he knew that his alliance would be with Chattanooga and not with Huntsville, and that's why we didn't do a Huntsville segment where we were going to do
it's so apparent. It's so apparent that he's a Chattanooga fan.
Clear. I will say on Toronto, they are ahead of Atlanta, which is a hilarious statement to be making in May of 2025. Atlanta is going through something right now. I believe they don't have a win in 5 or 6 matches. Ronnie Dyla, their coach, is on the hot seat to say the least. I don't know why we got to talking about Atlanta. Toronto's the one coming up. So it's away at Toronto after the Open Cup match. And like I said, I think the emphasis here is on the Open Cup. I think BJ Callahan obviously would want to win both. I don't think that's in question. But if he had to choose one, I believe he'll choose the Open Cup. I'll go ahead and go into my predictions for both games, and then I'll hand it over to Clay. But before that, please follow me at Valer Shabila on Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. And follow 615 Soccer as well. We have all sorts of amazing coverage, and we would love to have you be part of it. Also, please give this show a 5 stars on wherever you listen. And if you give us a 5-star review, we will read it on this show. That said, I think Nashville SC will lose in Orlando, and I think it will be going to extra time, and they'll lose in extra time. That is my guess. Maybe let's do 2-1 loss for Nashville SC. And then I do believe that Nashville SC will pull a 3-1 win in Toronto against the Maple Leafs. I know that's not them, but you get it. So
I believe it's the same company though.
Yeah, they do. They do own both teams. So yeah, there's that. So that's my prediction. I've always predicted that Nashville will lose to Orlando in this Open Cup match since the draw happened. So I will continue to live with it. And hey, for your sake and for everyone else listening's sake, I hope it's not true.
So first off, you can follow me at Clay Lessel on Instagram and Twitter. I think it's an interesting thing. Nashville has some bad history in the Open Cup with Orlando. There was a game that they dominated against Orlando just a few years ago. And honestly, Orlando ended up winning the Open Cup after that happened. And Nashville absolutely 100% had that game and just completely let it get away from them and ended up losing on penalty, ended up going out on penalties. And so I think that there's some unfinished business with Orlando. And, I think they resolve it. I think Nashville's going to go down there and get a win. I think that the person who definitely remembers that Orlando game quite a bit is Hani Mukhtar for the way it played out. So I'm going to say that Nashville gets a win in Orlando. I'm going to go 2-0. And Toronto's an interesting proposition because I don't think Toronto is as bad as it seems. I think they're pretty bad. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's as bad as it seems when you look at their results. They tend to play everyone very close, but they've only got one win at home this year. And having watched DC United the other day, it barely counts beating DC United at home, even though Nashville couldn't quite do it. Toronto did just score 6 against their most hated rival, and prior to that, they lost 1-0 to Cincinnati. So they've played some tight games. They drew with Vancouver earlier this year. They can make it difficult, and so in light of that, 1-1 draw. I'm gonna make the same prediction that I made last week, which is that Nashville beats a team they historically struggle with, and then has a draw against a team they absolutely are better than in every way.
Hey, we both. Well, I guess now we both. You have Nashville being undefeated well into the end of May. So well done for you. Good job for believing in this team. Pretty much as BJ Callahan believes.
Which is weird because I think I got painted as a skeptic.
I don't know, man. But nonetheless, make sure to follow us. Thank you so much for listening to the show and continuing to support. Join 615 Soccer. We appreciate it. Join the Discord. Tell us why we're wrong. All sorts of stuff. Submit mailback questions. And Clay has one more message for you.
Tell us in your 5-star review of this show what you think Steven is doing right now. And write it as, like, you can write it as Steven. He loved having to read a review from himself. So please, 5-star review. We'll read it on air. Also, 5-star review telling people why Valaire telling people why he loves Newcastle. That's another good one out there.
Don't do that. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next week.